All right, what's up, Outliers and Skrittiers? I'm John from Outlier, and this is the first in a series that we're planning that we're calling Expert Interviews. This series is part of the Outlier Chinese Mastery Community, which is a monthly membership that gets you access to in-depth, members-only videos, articles, live Q&A sessions, and a whole lot more. Each month we're going to do a deep dive on a specific theme. For example, last month we talked about tones, and we did a lot of content on that subject. A video about how to improve your tones, one on how tones interact with each other. Like, for example, if you take a 2-1 combination, pifu, should the second tone rise all the way to the level of the first? Well, no. The second tone actually ends a bit lower than the first begins, stuff like that. So we also did an article on the history of tones in Chinese, how they first arose and how they evolved over time from Old Chinese through Middle Chinese into Mandarin and other modern dialects. And we also did a video on how to use a technique called chorusing to improve your tones. So every month we're doing that kind of deep dive on a specific aspect of learning Mandarin to give you the tools and knowledge that you need to become a better, more effective learner so that you can get the most bang for your study buck. We're doing this particular live stream publicly so that you can get an idea of what the mastery community will be like. But in the future, these are going to be for members only. So if you're interested, there's a link in the description to join the community and step up your Chinese learning game. All right, pitch over. I've got Jake from Skritter here on standby, so let's go ahead and get into it. Now, most of you will be familiar with Skritter already, but for anyone who isn't, Skritter is an awesome app for training handwriting and stroke order. It's super intuitive, and there are different modes to accommodate different learning goals. They also have a bunch of built-in lists to study from, including even a list to accompany our character course, the Outlier Chinese Character Masterclass. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and bring Jake on, and we will get started. All right, Jake.
What's up, John?
How's it going, man?
I'm well. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. Enjoying a nice, sunny day here in Tokyo, but I guess it's nighttime there for you.
It is. It is. Coming in. I was asking. I said like good evening in Konbanwa, and I was like, no wait, I think it's Ohio because I must, but it is definitely evening over here. And I'm gonna apologize in advance if there's any like strange noises. My kids are upstairs getting ready for bed right now, and this microphone is pretty sensitive. So,
I'm not hearing anything at the moment, so I think we're
all
good.
right, perfect. Good, good, good. They can be a little rowdy up there.
Well, that's kids, right? Oh,
Yeah,
there we
absolutely.
go. I have a little pop-up with your name on it. I forgot to display when you came on. So, okay. So if you want to tell us, I mean, I think most people know Skritter, but if you want to tell us about Jake Gill, uh, you know,
Sure.
how did you get
Yeah.
into learning Chinese and your Chinese learning journey and whatnot? So,
So my Chinese language learning started in 2006 at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I graduated from there with a global studies degree, which is kind of like a revamp of like international relations, international studies. And there was a clear cut focus on like communication, but also like global citizenship. And so as a part of that program, there was a required 8 semesters of Chinese of a foreign language. We also did like had to study abroad and internship abroad, and those things were really appealing to me. And that's where I started learning Chinese. How I kind of got into that though was a little bit of a kind of like a happy circumstance that has sent me down a 15-year path, basically. When I was younger, I took German in high school and I was terrible at it. Well, I wasn't terrible at it. It turns out that you actually need to like use a language to get good at it. So I went to class and I didn't do my homework really. I mean, I did, but I never used the language. I never like had that moment where I was like, I'm actually communicating in German and speaking it and living it. But I had a unique opportunity when I was like 19, 20. I went to Indonesia and spent a month there, and I was forced to use a lot of Indonesian. And it was that moment that made me realize that I didn't, there is no like language gene. You just need to work at it and communicate and do these different things. and that kind of got me down this path of thinking about languages. And I actually really wanted to study Japanese, but Japanese classes were full, and so I was like, forget it, I'll just take Chinese. And I studied some like Chinese pod. This was back when podcasts were like all the rage, but they were the newest thing ever. And I had heard about Chinese pod, so I took a couple classes, and I walked into my first day of Chinese class and said, "Ni hao, wo jiao Jake." And my teacher was like, "Whoa, your pronunciation sounds pretty good." And I think genuinely from like that moment, like I had a little bit of encouragement. I had a moment where cultural connection with the teacher, and I was just kind of down this path. And a lot of things happened after that. I did study abroad. I went to Taiwan at Mandarin Training Center, Shida, and I spent 9 months there. And then I went to Beijing and studied at Beida for 6 months. I did an internship at CNN, completely ruled out journalism as a future career path while I was there. It just wasn't for me. And then I got a lot of opportunities. I was like a part of the Chinese Language Teachers Association, which used to be at UW-Milwaukee. And so I was working with Chen Yafeng, who now is over at Indiana University. But, she was one of the original authors of the Integrated Chinese series. And so like, I just had so many small moments that were just kind of snowballing into things. And one of my kind of mentors and Chinese teachers was a non-native speaker, and he was just a blast to be around. Olao Shi, Osongan. And he just got me kind of interested in Chinese education and being a teacher. And so I worked on this stuff, and I was a weekend school teacher for like gaoji ke at like a Taiwanese kind of weekend school, which was wild and bizarre. But just slowly kind of building my confidence up in the classroom and as an educator. And then I ended up going to Taiwan to do a master's in teaching Chinese as a second language. I actually met Ash there. He was my tongxue. Slowly, just tons of stuff. I taught Chinese for a little while. I taught an intro to Hanzi class. I taught Chinese 101. I was like a summer school counselor and all these different things. And then started working with Skritter and slowly transitioned from educator to director of development and daily affairs. And then in 2018 became CEO of Skritter. So it's like, that's like a lot of different things in there, but it's just been a wild journey, and I love like every moment of it. Seriously, it's pretty fun.
It is,
and
fun,
it's been like just a blast to like see the world, experience the world, and connect culturally with people that are a little bit different from me.
Yeah, it's funny how similar our journeys were in some ways. Like I didn't know you knew Chen Yafeng.
Yeah.
Did
you have her as a teacher or anything? Or you met her at ACTFL or something?
But Ash has known her for a while, and I met her at what was it called? The ACTFL, American Council for the Teaching of Foreign Languages conference in New Orleans a few years ago with Ash.
Mm-hmm.
Ash introduced me to her, and
she is a tornado of a woman. Yeah. Seriously. She was my boss. She was never my teacher, which was really kind of funny. But she took me under her wing, and we had a lot of fun working together in the same office. And I think that was like ultimately what kind of led me to be interested in education, like working with the CLTA, which is a great resource and has this brilliant academic journal that they publish and everything. And so like just being involved in this community and the teachers and getting to know these people, like I would say that most Chinese teachers love what they do. And they're very excited to like share their passion of Chinese with students, and like to be involved at that level just really got me down the path of being like, hey, I want to be in this space in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. That's and I started out with Chinese pod as well, probably around the same time you did, I guess.
I think we might have actually been like in Taiwan around the same time. I remember reading I think it was probably your blog or something back in the day, and just being like, John is insane, because you were doing, you were getting very into classical Chinese, and I was very much into modern Chinese and linguistics and things. But I was like, John is a beast.
Yeah, it's funny we never met, because I followed you on Twitter and stuff, and I knew who you were, and you were Gao Jian on Twitter, and then like
I think maybe a little bit. No, I don't know. Whatever. Yeah. I think my like Google search, like I think I've published more in my non-native name than I have in my English name. So kind of cool. Yeah. Not like Dashan level or anything though. That's a different level. But
he's a whole different level. Yeah. that was always it seems like he's not as well known these days with like newer learners, but he was always like
Hmm.
standard that everyone was held to of like,
Yeah, yeah,
you're
yeah,
you're good, but you're not as good as Dashan. And
yeah.
then apparently, I don't know if you saw this, but he talked about once where he got into a cab in Beijing, and the cab driver told him like, "Wow, your Chinese is good, but it's not as good as Dashan." And
Oh yes,
he was like, this thing that I've
It-
heard other learners complain about the entire time, like it
yes. It
happened to me.
finally has
Like,
come full circle. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. That's
yeah, yeah.
amazing. Uh,
But yeah, I mean,
well, I
he's
still follow him, and like every time he does like poetry and stuff on Instagram, I'm like someday.
yeah,
I'm not putting in the
he's
hours right now, but someday I hope to be somewhere in that ballpark, I guess.
man, it's a distant ballpark. I mean,
Hmm.
it's I got to the a reasonably decent level in Chinese, and then I remember visiting Dr. Baxter that does Old Chinese phonology and reconstruction, and
Hmm.
he mentioned I told him I was thinking about doing a PhD, and he said, well, maybe you should think about doing it in Japan. But I don't know if you want to
Mm.
get another language up to academic level like you did with Chinese. And I was like, man, no way.
Yeah, that is. As someone who's like just embarking down the Japanese journey, which I feel like I basically kind of put on pause for like 15 years. Yeah, I think about that like kind of every day that I study, and sometimes I feel like I'm like cheating on my main language. I'm like, should I be studying Chinese right now? Like, I don't know. I call it R&D for work, so it's all good. But
Yeah, it counts as work,
uh,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I'm having fun with it, and like knowing kanji is super helpful so far. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, it's kind of bizarre that we haven't crossed paths, but it's been an honor to kind of work with you a lot in the community, to see everything that you're working on with Ash, and Outlier stuff we have graciously provided by you inside of our apps with a call to action to go check out your full dictionary. And but talking back and forth with you always has been it just you know building this community, working on where you're working on your master class and everything else. Like, I mean, to me, when I think of people in the space that are doing solid work for the entire community, like you and Ash are the first people that I think about, because you're seriously, it's like one of the resources that I wished I had when I was a student, like in the beginning. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I kind of wish I had Skritter too, to be honest. But like, it's just like, yeah, you're making sense of characters and looking them up and doing the research and like telling us the information that we really need to know as early students. And that's information was so hard to find 10 years
Yep.
ago, 15 years ago, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, excuse me. Yeah, I used to use Skritter actually way before it was an iOS app, when it was
Mm,
the web app, but I never had the like tablet
the
or whatever
Wacom?
to, yeah,
Yeah,
the,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so it was like click and drag. And I remember when I first got an iPhone, one of the first things I thought was Skritter would be awesome on this thing. And
Yes.
I mean, this was, I guess, well before you were with Skritter, but I remember emailing the guys and going like, guys, you really should do this you should do an iPhone app for this. And it was, I think, a couple of years before that ever happened. I think it was when I was in Taiwan before that happened.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
my first time in Taiwan, I wasn't there. So I joined the team, I think, in 2011, and it was right before we started actually working on. I was like an
Mm.
early alpha beta tester. It's actually like how I got a job at Skritter beyond Blogger.
Oh, okay.
I was like giving them bug reports and feedback, and like I actually like went out and bought a phone just for Skritter. I remember reading blog posts back in the day of like why Skritter made me spend $600 on an iPhone for Skritter, But I remember we launched on my birthday, and it was like the worst birthday ever because the app was bricked for anyone that wasn't already a Skritter app user. And I just remember being like, all right, well, we're doing like a 24-hour day today on my B day.
Yep.
But it was okay.
Yeah, you got
It
to
all
do what
worked
you
out.
got to do sometimes, right?
You got to do what you got to do. Exactly.
Yeah. So
Oh, yeah.
what about these days? I mean, what do you like? I know you're learning Japanese, but you're still
Hmm.
working on your Chinese. What does a study day look like for you these days?
So study day,
Like I think I saw
the study
recently that you were working through 思想与社会, right? the Thought and
I am
Society
a little
textbook?
bit like I'm doing it for fun. I thought it was a really interesting textbook. I had it on my shelf. I've got a bunch of books back here, and like one of my kind of like 长期目标 is to read everything on my shelf. It's such a good book.
Yeah, it is.
It is a fantastic book. It's this. I would say that when I read it, it's native level, but it's native level in a way. Like when I was reading the intro, you could tell that the creators of this textbook, what they want out of you is they want you to be able to not only understand this language but use this language. And it really brought me back to a lot of my like pre-grad school prep. Um, and so, learning these interesting phrases, reading this book, and just seeing, they're talking about interesting topics. And I thought that was amazing. So I really liked it. I'm slowly kind of working through that. I would say my normal day, though, in the morning, I do some reading. Right now I'm reading, it's pretty funny. It's a book, it's 50个教育法. 我把三个儿子送入了史丹福. So it's a mom who got 3 kids into Stanford, and she wrote 50 tips for education. And I'm a parent of 2 little kids. And I mean, I don't know, it's nothing like groundbreaking to me, but it's an interesting book, and it's a pretty light read, and something that my mother-in-law gave to me. And so I thought if I read it, we can chat about it a little bit. And,
Okay. Yeah.
she raised a pretty good daughter that went to Berkeley and is a doctor. And so, we'll compare some notes. And now it's just a fun little light read. I try and clear my queue. I had like a 500 and something day streak on Skritter, and then I started studying Japanese, and I get a little confused some days about which app I opened. So that was broken. Although I have been Skrittering daily for a very long time, and I love it. So I'm actually working on like my handwriting in Chinese. I'm taking some calligraphy classes with my Chinese teacher. And then, I occasionally do like podcasts and audio. But like, if I can read for 30 minutes a day, I'm pretty happy. If I can spend some time Skrittering every day, I'm pretty happy. And then once a week, I have a 1-hour class with a world-class educator on italki that I really like working with, Wei Wei Lao Shi. I actually have a YouTube video that we put up where it's like, we did like a 1-hour session talking about, I spend like $200 a month or whatever on these classes, right? And I'm like, is it worth it? Is it worth it to do one-on-one tutoring, as a student, as a beginner? We look into, should you be talking to various, like, should you have only one tutor? Should you have multiple tutors? Should you pay for high quality tutors versus community tutors? So if anyone's interested in checking that out, it is on the Skritter site. We actually have like a study deck for it as well. But we spend an hour talking in Chinese. We have a bunch of keywords in there. But yeah, I do that like once a week. And then I use Chinese. I'm in the Bay Area, so I'm fortunate enough that I can use Chinese when I go out for food and whatever. But like, most of my time is not actually spent studying anymore. It's more about, the logistics of running an international team and trying to grow our app and do those things. So I'm like much more in like a business mindset these days.
Yep.
And so the cool thing for me, I think the good days are when I can bridge the gap, or when I can actually leverage Chinese as a skill to unlock another skill, right? So like using Chinese right now to learn calligraphy is amazing. I love like working with my teacher, and, we talk about it in Chinese. We talk about calligraphy in Chinese. She tells me things like, we don't dong bi, we yun bi, and all these different kinds of things, talking about our qi. And like, it's just cool, man, to be like at that level, right? So that's like a good day for me, I think. It's not a lot of Chinese, but it's like, I think about 2 or 3 years ago, I just decided that I wasn't going to let my Chinese atrophy anymore. And so I've just been working on maintaining it regularly and actively, like every single day, just little bits, what I can do. I'm not in an environment where I can do it all the time. I'm not as hardcore where I'm like, it's not Katsumoto style, all Japanese all the time for me, or all Chinese all the time for me, but it is enough that I feel like my Chinese, like the last time I went to Taiwan, I think my teacher was like, wow, your Chinese isn't as bad as I thought it would be. And I just had to laugh. But like, I mean, genuinely, if you're not in the environment, it can be really hard to maintain a level. And I do think that my Chinese was way better, when I was in grad school, but like, sure, it probably should be at that point. You know what I mean? I was using it every day for like 13 hours a day. Of course it was really good.
Right. Yeah. It's, well, and I tell people all the time, because they're like, well, you lived in Tokyo now for 8 years. Why isn't your Japanese better? And I go, well, running a company takes a lot of time.
Yeah,
I don't
really
have the luxury of,
well, especially in the level of research that you and Ash are getting into, right? Like, you got to be up on the Chinese and the literature and the academics and everything else, and that's like, that has a cost, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
So, but yeah, like you said, knowing the kanji already helps just tremendously. I mean, I could read fairly well from day one. When I first got here,
Mm-hmm.
like at least I could
Mm-hmm.
figure my way around, and if I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to pronounce the kanji, I at least I can write it down and show it to somebody if I'm trying to get
Yeah.
somewhere. Like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
helps tremendously. And there was
For
one
sure.
time actually I visited a calligraphy shop. Actually, they had brushes and nice paper and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't talk to the guy. He didn't speak any English. I didn't speak much Japanese. We literally wrote in classical Chinese on a piece of paper to talk to each other, and it worked really
Awesome.
well. Like, I mean,
Awesome.
it was
Awesome.
crazy how well it worked, and we were both like laughing the whole time at how ridiculous this
Yeah.
was. Like,
Yeah. You're like
an
giddy. I have a
American
couple of
and a
moments like that.
Japanese guy talking to each
Yeah.
other in classical
Yeah.
Chinese.
Yeah.
But yeah, it
We,
was
my wife's parents are from Hong Kong, and so they speak. We can communicate, and I use Mandarin, they use Cantonese, and I can understand them. But like, it's a lot of like context. You just learn things the longer that you study languages, of like
yeah,
filling in the gaps and
yeah,
whatever. So like, pick up a word, and then I just contextualize. Okay, they're probably talking about this, right? I know their rough routine. Like, I talked to my wife about it. But if my wife's not there, we literally pick up a pen and paper and just write what we
yeah,
need. And there's been several times where we're like, "What are you saying?" I'm like,等一下, get the paper out. And oh,
yeah,
because it's so different. Canto and Mandarin are so different sometimes, where you just get thrown for a loop.
yeah,
But like, yeah, the characters bring us together, which is amazing. So,
yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, So yeah, speaking of, like you said, you're learning calligraphy right now, working on your
mm,
handwriting. We're actually
mhm.
that's the topic of this month for the mastery community. And
Nice.
being at Skritter, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've got a lot to say about handwriting.
One pro tip here. I'm going to give it away for free.
Yeah,
When you get scrap paper from people in the mail or whatever, right? Just like use it to start writing stuff down.
yeah,
Don't throw away your scrap paper. Paper is expensive. Let's use it. If someone's going to send you a piece of junk mail, write on
yeah, for sure.
it. But no, I love characters, man. I mean, I seriously love characters. I'm totally cool with devoting the rest of my life to learning and unlocking more and more of them and improving my handwriting and my calligraphy and everything. Not because I think it's incredibly important, just because I have an appreciation for the art form, I think,
Yeah,
really.
yeah. How is your handwriting? Mine's atrocious.
Mine was atrocious for a very long time. I think it's still not great, but on my studygram on Instagram, I'm like actively working on it. So I really actually enjoy. Again, it's like using Chinese as a medium. So I'll go in and find, whether it's like Gangbi or Ingbi or like. There's a difference between pen and there's a difference between calligraphy brush. Calligraphy is very different. So I'm finding right now, like, I need to be very mindful of how I hold a brush, my posturing,
Hmm.
how I'm moving my whole hand, and I'm a little bit of an amateur artist, and the background here, I've got some character work, some graffiti work that I do, and everything, and I'm very interested in lettering and typefacing and typography and things. But that doesn't translate one to one to like actually doing calligraphy. It's just so different. So it's very new to me. It's not like frustrating. It's pretty zen for me, but it's really funny. Like, I'm still working with my teacher on writing like iheng, just eat, and then we're going to work on art and san, and then we're going to do like da and tai and all these different things. And it's really humbling, kind of,
Yeah,
in a way, but it's like, I just have to remind myself, like, this is different. Like, just because you're a native speaker of Chinese doesn't mean A, you have good handwriting, or B, you know how to use shufa. um, but I think that like learning and understanding and appreciating, cursive script and things like that, like Xingshu, Caoshu, Kaishu, all these different things, to me is just like, it's interesting from a artistic perspective, from a typography perspective, from a
mhm,
whatever perspective. So practicing my handwriting deliberately has been super helpful in improving it immensely, because I have pretty atrocious handwriting in English. So I'm trying to like work on that, really.
yeah,
It's a process. Like, I mean, I don't know, man. 活到老学到老. Like, there's always something new to
right.
learn, and I can spend a lifetime learning Chinese and characters in some way, shape, or form. So let's do it.
Yeah, for sure. There's so much with Chinese. Something I said at the beginning of the classical Chinese course that we're doing right now was
Mm.
like you're never going to be perfect. And I show a piece of calligraphy by I think it's Su Shi, right?
Oh, we got a comment here. Someone's calling us out for some not as bad as it used to be. I
Oh
got
yeah,
you,
yeah.
man. Hang on.
Yeah, if we can get some handwriting sample. I'm not sure I have any of mine. Actually, I probably do. Jotting notes in books and stuff.
I mean, I'm like looking through. None of this stuff is particularly good. Well, let's see here. Here's some of the like. My notebooks are just messy, like crazy messes. Okay, so that's I'm not gonna like show that as anything particularly good, but let's see. Like here's some, this is like using a one of my favorite brushes. If anyone is looking into like a bridge the medium between Malby and a normal like traditional pen,
Mm.
you can get these Pentel brushes
The
with
pen
like
brushes. Yeah, yeah.
preloaded. Yeah, they're like $6-7 on Amazon. You can refill them. They kind of write like a calligraphy brush, but they also don't at the same time. I was working on some like Fool for around New Year. I mean, they're okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Not
They
bad.
got style. But let's see if I can do a. Let's see if I have a. I don't know. I've been doing like HSK handwriting characters. Just tons and tons of pages of them. I don't know. Hi, how about? I'll hold it as close as I can.
Yeah,
Like
it's nicer than mine, man.
Yeah, it's. I don't know. Check out my Instagram if you're looking for some more. Like it's really not. It's not good, but it's getting better.
Yeah.
And it's a what I really find, like if someone is genuinely interested in looking into this, there are tons of YouTubers. If you take like whatever character you're looking for and just Google it and say, Ingby or whatever for
Mm.
like Zamasia, and then put your character in, there are some great characters that teach you and they normally guide you through it.
Yeah.
It's probably the best. If your Chinese is at level, then you're going to want to watch native speakers write about it, because like native speakers have the same, it's like how to improve my handwriting. Then they go down this rabbit hole and then they find some calligraphers that they like or some penmen, they just like find handwriting that you like and then work on emulating it.
Yep.
And just practice it a lot, and then and pick maybe a particular style or two and slowly work through those. And then once you build your confidence, then you can start unlocking like other levels and whatever. Would be my advice.
Yeah, yeah.
For the. But I hope, hopefully that was like a good little taste into. Some days they're like, every now and again I'll write one. I'm like, that's pretty good. All right, John, let's see yours.
Yeah, yeah. I've got it. I got to turn my light off so it doesn't wash out the page. But let's see. These are my margin notes.
Oh, that's you get a pass when you're writing notes, though. You just want it to be. That's
Yeah,
not
but
bad.
it,
He's
it's
pretty
a,
good.
it's about this. Well, this was, I guess, 9 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago.
Oh,
But
okay.
my handwriting hasn't changed. I mean, it's still the same. But I'll tell you,
Yeah.
the best compliment I ever got was, or one of the best compliments I ever got on my Chinese was my language exchange partner.
Uh-huh.
I said something about how my handwriting is 很丑, and she goes,
Mm-hmm.
没错，很丑，但是很道地的丑. Like, yeah, yeah, you're right.
Nice.
It's ugly,
There
but
you go.
it's
There you
an
go. Yeah,
authentic ugly.
it's authentically ugly. Yeah.
Like, okay, well, I'll take that.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly. No, but it's one of these skills in these crafts where like if you don't actually put the time and energy in, you're not going to get better at it. And there's
yeah.
definitely ways to like study poorly.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And
Like,
sometimes I feel a little bit like, well, I used to when I see kind of like atrociously bad handwriting, and it's like I don't want to play like internet superhero and be like, you should do it this way. So I just let it go. But you can spend, much like I did, many, many, many years of your life writing terrible handwriting and having no idea why it doesn't ever look better, because you don't learn the fundamental rules and principles about how handwriting should look.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a skill, and it's like anything else requires muscle memory, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you've got to drill it over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
You're not just going to
But
magic.
like focused muscle memory, not just oh, I have a box here. Like it was probably only this year that I started thinking about like the boxes in space and like leaving space for characters to breathe from like an artistic perspective. And I was
Mhm.
like, what?
Yeah, yeah,
Where have you been all my life?
right.
You
It's
know,
stuff you don't even think about.
handwriting gurus. Yeah,
Yeah,
but it's and I think that part of that, and maybe this is like a good segue into handwriting and whatever, but like genuinely, I actually think that we introduce in second language for a lot of students, we introduce handwriting way too early. Like I bought a calligraphy brush because it was on my syllabus for my first year Chinese class. I was writing calligraphy before I knew how to write anything, before I could even say ni hao in a good
Yeah.
way or whatever, I was actually like, they're like, we're going to use ink and paper and write calligraphy. And it's like, I don't even know what I'm writing yet. Like, okay, I'm writing ER, son, whatever. But it didn't feel particularly good. And because I was spending so much time trying to just make characters work and put these strokes on a paper and remember them and make them stick in a way that didn't make any sense. No one was telling me about components and radicals and, you know, all the things that we stress a lot in our apps and our courses.
Yeah.
I was just like drilling them over and over to try and get a grade. And no one ever pulled me aside and said, this is the thing you actually want to work on if you want to have nice handwriting. And I don't think anyone ever cared about it. It wasn't required.
Yeah.
But I never really, no one pulled me aside and said, hey, Jake, this is how you actually do it. And I still don't really know how to do it other than, I'm willing to like work. I've learned a couple things over the years, but, we start handwriting way too early.
What's that? Oh,
we start handwriting way too early.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I know philosophically how to improve my handwriting. I just haven't taken the time to do it. I mean, it's a big project.
Yeah, it's a time thing for sure.
Yeah.
And there's a million things that we always want to do in life. So, for me, it's kind of backburnered a little bit for things like Japanese and calligraphy and doing more reading and spending more time with my family. But I still really, there's something zen about sitting down for 5 or 10 minutes and doing a little handwriting. Like I can actually appreciate it these days. Whereas before it used to stress me out.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you think? Like, I mean, a really common thing I see people talking about these days is like, oh, you don't need to learn to write by hand. We use Pinion input or whatever input method on our phone and our computers and stuff. So there's no real need in daily life, even if you live in China or Taiwan, to write by hand. And so a lot of people will say just skip it altogether. Or
are those the same people that post on Reddit and ask, what is this person writing on this piece of paper for me? Because I can't read it.
There's probably the same people. Yeah.
I joke, but there is some upside to learning how to handwrite. Now when and where we introduce this, I think is incredibly important.
Yep.
I do think it's genuinely overstressed in traditional educational methods. Like for me, it was, you had Tingshe every single day and you had to write these things and you had to produce them. And I spent so much time handwriting characters, so much time.
Yep.
And it was like, my Chinese wasn't getting better. Like my characters weren't even getting, my character recognition wasn't even getting better. I was just writing this crap over and over and over again because I had to for a grade.
Yep.
And that I don't think is the way. However, when someone told me things like components and radicals and how not even radicals, but like, okay, you've got your form component, you have your meaning component. Oh yeah. And like 85 to 95% of these characters are, 形声字.
Right.
Oh, okay. That changes like everything. Now I'm no longer thinking about strokes. I'm thinking about components and I'm thinking about how they combine together and I'm thinking about the structure of the character. And when I start doing that, now I'm chunking information in a way different way and my brain is wrapped around it. And now I don't need to spend nearly as much time handwriting characters and like using that information to recall it. So like the time investment, once that aha moment happens, goes down significantly. Is your handwriting going to look very good? No. Should you be able to handwrite at that point if you understand stroke order and understand how characters work? Yes.
Yep.
So like, let's teach every single person that's learning Chinese that skill set because you can use it to read really sloppy, really cho handwriting because you understand stroke order.
Yep.
You can read it you can use it to understand calligraphy. You can, and appreciate an art form. You can, you can go on and do all these different things. You can be a lettering artist. Like there's so many things that you can do with handwriting that it seems really silly to just be like, no, we're just not going to teach this. So I think there's a time and a place for it. And maybe one of the best ways, like what I did for UW Milwaukee when I was teaching there, was I created an introduction to Chinese characters course where we covered everything you needed to know about characters in general. Handwriting was a part of it. We definitely handwrote, but we wrote with intention. And we did it as like a 2-credit course that you took outside of your Chinese class. So my first year students were working on their first year stuff. My second year students were working on their second year stuff. The third, fourth year, everyone was working on their own stuff and they were doing it in the context of learning characters. Mm-hmm. And when we did that, we're going to handwrite because I can't like assess your typing. you know, so then more of your time can go into typing and more of your time can go into writing essays and doing that. But like inside of this class, we're talking about characters. And if we're going to talk about characters, you might as well write them on a paper because at some point you may need to write characters.
Yeah.
And what you don't want to do is get to the place. So I was in a place personally where I went to grad school in Taiwan and we used handwriting. Like it was not a like, well, if you want to. No, we have a 3-hour exam and you can't cheat on it. So you're going and showing up in this exam.
Yep.
And I only was able to do that because I knew how to handwrite. And the only reason I knew how to handwrite was because I used Skritter for an hour every day for like 2.5 months, freaking out, going, someday I'm going to need to know how to do this.
Yep.
And as a teacher, like I don't want to be at the whiteboard and forget, TB Wang's, even though teachers do it all the time.
Right.
But like I didn't want to be that teacher on my first day of class.
Yep.
So I spent a lot of time learning how to handwrite. And at this point, it's like a skill that you have to maintain and practice, but like I don't spend nearly as much time and energy as anyone probably thinks. And like, I don't think you actually genuinely need to, but there could come a point in a career path where you may want to learn how to handwrite.
Yep.
So let's at least teach the basics, kind of like, I mean, let's not judge against native speakers, but like my daughter is learning English and she's learning how to handwrite, and like you could say, everyone has a smartphone. Well, let's still teach her the ABCs and how it works.
Yep.
Because it's, sometimes you don't have, like, what do I do when my phone's dead? What do I do when I'm trying to communicate with a guy in Japan where we can't talk to each other?
Yep.
Bust out the pen, man, write it down.
Yep.
Like it can be beneficial. It definitely has its upsides. And the worst case scenario, you can write like a nice hongbao to somebody. You can write a nice, you can write your name and make it look cool and have a nice party trick.
Right.
So the question really ultimately becomes like, how much time do you want to invest? And I think that ultimately becomes like, well, what do you want to do with your language? If you just want the basics and you don't care that much, fine. Let's teach you how to write 100 characters. Let's teach you stroke order and let's teach you how characters work. So you take the master class, you take the Skritter character course, you understand how this works, and then you can apply that theoretical knowledge to every other character in the world always, if you want to.
Yep. And
I think that that's probably like good enough for like G2 level. And then beyond that, it's like, what do you want to do?
Yeah, I agree. And I do think like Skritter allows students to hit that sweet spot, especially early on in their learning where, like you said, you don't need to be spending hours and hours like handwriting your vocabulary 50 or 100 times each word.
And to be fair, you're not actually handwriting in Skritter.
Well, but it teaches you the stroke order, and you get get that sort of mind muscle connection where you've got the mechanics of the way the strokes flow and stuff. And like you said, that'll even help you to be able to decipher handwriting because you look at it and you've got the motion like in your mind, and so you're able to kind of pick apart what it is. So
yeah. No. It's super helpful. And I think like, getting to that moment where I started unlocking kind of characters and their the components inside of them and how they all worked, that just made handwriting easier, and it made reading easier, and it made recognition easier, and it even made typing and recognizing and finding characters easier. Like everything just leveled up because I had that like baseline skill set. But before that, I really genuinely felt like I was spending so much time like for nothing. It was like, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to stress out about it. And then like 2 weeks later, I'm legitimately just going to forget how to write this character unless it's something that I wrote over and over and over again because I didn't understand why I was writing this character in the way that I was writing it. I was so obsessed with the stroke and how it maybe kind of sort of looked on the page, and like that wasn't very helpful. Whereas like with Skritter, I mean, I genuinely think it's like pretty zen and kind of fun to do it. And like we make it really, like we're pretty relaxed about like positioning of the strokes and everything. You can get obsessive and turn on raw squigs or raw squigs and do these different settings, which is super fun. And I really like to mess with that. But in the beginning, it's more just about like getting that, getting it to the point where like you can look at a character and you suddenly realize like it's actually easier for me to write this character into a dictionary, into Pleco or whatever, than it is for me to try and find what this character is or open my phone and do an OCR and zoom in on it and crop it. Like, no, dude, just learn the stroke order and then write it down. And then boom, you have it like instantly.
Yep. And Pleco's handwriting recognition is so good. And it's such a useful tool that, when I see people
like
talk
write it
about
sloppy,
using
but
the
write in the right
OCR,
stroke order.
I haven't used Plico's OCR, and the OCR is good too, but I don't use it like ever. Unless, you know, if I have a page of text that I need to scan in and like digitize or whatever, that's a different story.
Hmm.
But like just right
Yeah,
on the screen and it works so well, but it's something you
yeah,
can't
it
do if
does.
you haven't learned how to,
It,
you know, haven't learned the
correct.
stroke order
So
enough.
it is one of these things where like there is time and energy and you to invest into it. How much you want to do, I think, depends on where you really want to go with your language.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, but knowing it and knowing the basic rules of it is actually going to probably be a time saver in the long run for you as a language learner.
Yeah.
And then you can get to the point where someday you're like, yeah, I want to work on handwriting. And to be honest, like there are courses that are old school and you don't really have a choice. If you want college credit, like you want to go to Taiwan, you go to mainland China and they're going to assess your language skills, you're going to, like, if you want a scholarship, they're going to make you handwrite. Like they're just going to.
Those little pink books you remember in Taiwan
They're just yeah,
that
they're
you have
just
to like,
going to. They're
yeah,
just gonna make you do it. So like you can either you can show them the academic paper that says you shouldn't do it, but they're still gonna make you do it because
yeah,
that's how they were brought up. That's their culture. That's what they want. They want that element of their culture to
yeah,
remain. That's why they didn't go to, like we're not using pinyin right now in 2022. We're using characters.
yeah.
And the HSK is now like rolling out like a handwriting portion of their exam in the future.
Mm.
So like someone in the government still wants you to learn to write.
Yeah, that's yeah.
But I will say that as an educator and in seeing the research out there and reading this, I mean I do think that there's a fine line, and the real question is like, hey, when do we introduce this? Should you be doing this from day one?
Yeah.
I think let's build up the oral communication skills, build up your listening skills. Let's build up your, have you able to have a conversation. My daughter is like fluent in English and she can't read yet, but we can converse about anything under the sun, basically.
Right.
So, like we could probably mimic that a little bit more from the non-native side, and I don't think that we would suffer too much.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
handwriting, a recognition size. I'm just looking at some of the comments. Stroke order. I have been noticing that the Japanese stroke order is a little bit different, and it's kind of
Yeah.
trolling me.
Yeah, it is, but you
Thankfully,
know,
there's a change your grade button on Skritter, and I'm like, yeah, I got this.
if you get the, yeah, you know, I write sometimes and my girlfriend goes like, nah, this is the wrong stroke order. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not going to relearn stroke order just to learn Japanese. Like, sorry, you wouldn't expect
Yeah, we got a stroke order deck for you, John, in Skritter Japanese app if you're interested in it. No, but it is a little bit different.
yeah, it is a bit
Um,
different. It's a little bit more traditional, actually. It's more like what the traditional stroke orders would have been before the standardization. But
Yeah,
then of
and
course
I
there's
think that there's a
simplification.
lot of elements where, yeah, from the calligraphy side, when I'm watching someone do calligraphy and not maybe like kaishu, but more grass style or running script.
Mm,
Yeah, I think it probably matches more with Japanese, or how I would write it if I'm trying to stylize something. I'm like, yep, I'm gonna take that shortcut there, and that's actually like how they end up doing it. So
yeah, yeah,
fun stuff.
yeah. It
There's a
is.
path
It's
in the
super
brain that
interesting.
optimizes handwriting no matter the language should be practiced for this reason. There is certainly a lot of there's a ton of research out there for native speakers and the link between handwriting and recognition, and like being able to like quickly parse information. There's not nearly enough in second languages right now. And there probably needs to be more, but there certainly is a lot. I mean, there's a huge connection between what we do and some of the muscle memory and everything else, and there's a lot of long-term studies, but there's not enough for second language learners. And then the question really becomes like time. How much time and energy are we going to be putting in? And I think the other consideration, which is like often, if we're thinking about like a business sense, enrollment rates are real bad in Chinese and Japanese after like the first quarter, I think. So like, how do you introduce this in a way that doesn't like crater your enrollment into second year or second semester or everything else,
Yeah, yeah, but yeah. I
which
mean,
is a
there is
whole
like a
different can of worms.
there's like a kinesthetic element of that. I think practicing handwriting or knowing stroke order, like it just, yeah, it really helps to cement things and helps
Mm-hmm.
to recognize characters too. I mean, even printed characters, because you know, you see a lot of people that get confused by well, they call it similar looking characters, but it's like,
Mm-hmm.
but you've got a component on the left hand side that's completely different. They don't even look alike, and it's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think really having experience writing that stuff down uh, really helps you to distinguish
I
characters.
think
I mean, it shouldn't
I think
be.
if you're writing with intention, I think there is a way though where you can kind of brain off and just be a little bit zombie about it, and
Yeah.
that's where you get in trouble because you end up spending so much time and energy without like intentionally writing something,
Mhm.
or you just like jump in and you don't quite understand how the components fit together or why. And that's again why I just
That's a
think
big
in
part of it. Yeah.
Outlier and think like when I was, and it's kind of a time suck if you don't have resources like Outlier. Like you're spending so much time and energy looking up components and information, and then you don't really know. Like, okay, do I trust Yellow Bridge? Like back in the day, it was like there were like 5 or 6 reasons. No, exactly, John. So like, what do you do? And so you end up kind of just being like, well, forget it. I'm just gonna like write it now and I'll figure it out later. But like you never really figure it out unless you actually take the time to meaningfully, break down the character, understand the character, then write the character, and then probably come back with an SRS system a few days later and say, hey, do you still understand this? And I mean that's what we built at Skritter. It was literally designed in a college classroom for students that were trying to pass Chinese in a way that wasn't insane. And like that's how Skritter was born.
Oh, it's interesting. I didn't realize that. It's interesting
Mm-hmm.
how many good tools for learning Chinese have a similar story like that. Like Plico, for example. Mike Love
Mm-hmm.
talks about how like he was studying in Beijing and he made something for himself on his Palm Pilot. This was back in the day, and people started looking at it, going like, "Wow, can I have that? Like, can you put that on my Palm Pilot?" And enough
Mm-hmm.
people loved it that he went, "Huh, this is a good idea. Maybe I should
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
selling this thing." And
Yeah.
now it's, I mean, it's
We
one of
have
the
a
few things for Chinese that I think is indispensable.
mhm.
So
We have a question here
yeah,
from Steve about Taiwan and Skritter support Taiwanese standards, font, stroke order, pronunciation, tones, bopomofo. So if you have the Skritter Write Chinese application, we have a bopomofo mode that you can turn on. It works for characters and for example sentences. We also have a Taiwan MOE font that you can turn on that I would highly encourage you to use with raw squigs for right now. In terms of like standards of font, so we do have a font. We're going to try and roll it out more. To do this is it is the change to our entire database of Skritter, which is why we just can't be like, yeah, we're just going to do it. But font, stroke order, pronunciation, including tones, and like all those things, you can do full tones. It's not ideal in Skritter. I think we do it probably better than most other apps out there in the sense that we like actually acknowledge that these things are different in Taiwanese Standard Mandarin. We are definitely working on improving it to make it like good. Like I want to, I really do. um, and it's a huge time investment, it's a huge energy investment, it's a huge all these different things. I will not rest until it is done though, because it is very important to me to get it right.
yeah,
So we're slowly transitioning that. So Steve, I just saw I saw your question. I see Gwillem is in here answering as well.
yeah,
But like we're working on it. We actively converse about these things as a team. I work with, it's important to John and to us and to like Ula, who's also on my team.
yeah.
He studied in Taiwan as well. I have a Taiwanese Maria Malao. She's a PhD from Taiwan. I work with Iona. We have a lot of Taiwanese people. We want to get it right. I wish we could just snap our fingers and do it. It can't be done, but it's like it's on the list of things to do, and we're slowly chipping away at it. So
Yeah, well,
sorry
that's
to
great.
cut off.
Big
I saw that
project.
and I wanted to hit it up.
No, 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 it's good, good. And yeah, for anybody watching, like if you've got questions, we're gonna open it up to Q&A here in a few minutes. What I meant to ask you before we started this, but what's your time like? I mean, I normally try to
Oh,
keep these to about an hour, but I never am successful with that. So um,
yeah, I mean, I think if there's some things, I know there are a couple of questions. I feel like we covered the handwriting one. There's one
yeah,
more
yeah, for sure.
that I think is a good one. I'm
Yeah,
down to hang out for a little bit longer. I also want to make sure that I do some reading time and stuff with my kids. So I've
sure. Yeah,
probably
yeah.
got like maybe like an extra like 15 minutes after, just depending on how the questions go.
Yeah,
So
sure. Sounds good. Yeah. So, yeah, the other question I wanted to ask, and I think I might make this excuse me, a regular thing with these
mm,
this interview series is if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing, anything about the Chinese learning landscape, what would it be and why? And it can't be make
yeah.
Skritter mandatory for all learners or anything like
Oh,
that.
I was gonna say make Skritter have Taiwanese Mandarin support. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
No, I think we were hitting on something like this. It was something that we literally just talking about it with Placo and Skritter and Outlier and a lot of great resources that are out there. So I'm going to riff on that a little bit and say if I had a magic wand, what I would try and do is figure out a way where the educational system for no matter where you are is like a legitimate 50-50 split between a native and a non-native teacher in all classrooms.
Mm.
Maybe not at every single level, but like at some point, like you need to have, there are certain things that advanced students of non-native students know that native teachers do not know.
Yep.
Resources that are really good,
Yep.
tips and tricks, like pitfalls that we've avoid. Like my first year Chinese teacher, I had a Taiwanese teacher, I had a Chinese teacher from Beijing, like, and I had a non-native, I had Olaf, Andy Olson, and like from his day one, I asked him like, man, your Chinese is awesome. What should I do to be like you? And he's like, dude, do not ignore your tones. And he said it from day one, and it was like, you would think that would be a no-brainer. It is not.
It's not.
But him saying that was so genuinely helpful to me from the very beginning. And I'm like, what do you do? He's like, you can do this, but just mimic a lot, like listen to the audio recordings, repeat it back, like get it in your head that Chinese is a tonal language. You cannot change that, and you can't mess around. You cannot pretend that it doesn't have tones, and you can't make up your tones. If you start doing this crap, like no one is going to understand you, and you don't think that that's going to, no, it's going to be fine. They're going to, no, they're not.
They won't.
They won't. They just won't, and they will. But if you get to an advanced level and your tones suck, no one's going to take you seriously.
It's a mess. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm
It's
sure you've
real
heard the
hard to
story,
fix.
but I bet Ash's tones were a mess when you first met him. Actually, I don't know if you remember back then. But...
we were probably speaking mostly in English. Like Ash was not in my classes. He was like, I saw him wandering the halls and in the academic resource section always. He always had his face in a book. Right, and I was like, what is this guy doing? Oh yeah, he's working on his dissertation. And
yeah.
But
well, he learned Chinese to the point where he was giving papers at academic conferences in toneless Chinese. Like he knew that tones existed, but he had never, because he was told early on, you don't have to worry about it. People will understand you anyway in context.
Yeah.
And he went to this conference, and actually afterwards, a professor, it was actually Dr. Baxter, who I mentioned earlier, that does Old Chinese phonology, came up to him and goes, Ash, nobody can understand you. You have to fix your tones. And it was embarrassing. And so he even, hired a tutor to help him work on his tones.
Well,
and
that's it's avoidable, right? It is genuinely unavoidable. So anyways, to the magic one thing, I think that if we have this combination, maybe if there's just there's a language support group, right? There's that you've got your study buddies, but you have a visit from your, fourth year, third year Chinese students that are non-native speakers, and they just open up the floor for an hour or two. Hey, beginners, what questions do you have? Right. And I think, genuinely, this is the community stuff that you are creating right now with your projects,
exactly
right?
what we're
appealing and
trying
interesting,
to be,
right? This is really what I think, and there needs to be a balance because there are certain things that we don't know. We have Yugon, and so a sense of a language, but we're not native speakers, and and so we're gonna have our own kind of pitfalls and things, and even maybe Dashan has perfect Chinese and has the perfect Chinese for every single situation, but most of us don't, even if we're good, So we all dread the, hey, how do you say this in Chinese question? It's always very difficult.
Right.
And so we refer to our native speaker counterparts. But when they say, hey, how do you study for this exam tomorrow? How do you, Jake, separate these things in your brain? I probably have a good solution that might be better than a native speaker's in that regard. And so I know that a lot of languages, like Afro talks about it a lot, our split in language learning, at least in America, in the United States, is not 50-50, not even close. And so it's very hard to see role models in the language and things like that. And I just think have a couple non-native speakers on staff, and if you don't think that I was actually at NTNU for grad school, and they were like, hey, we need to up our game. And, we're not having these people that are passing these high level exams or whatever. And in front of our entire board of academic directors, well, send them to NTU then. Because they have classes like Sisang Yu Shehui, and these people that are coming out of Taida were amazing at Chinese, and it was a pretty blase moment. But it's a serious thing, and we need to figure out ways to train non-native speakers to high levels so that they can also help educate, but also to pass down some of this other knowledge that we don't have. So if I had a magic wand, I would just make that happen right away. I don't know how that would work out, but it doesn't matter because I have a magic wand.
Yeah, that's a I was curious to hear what you were going to say, and that's I would do that too, because it's some advice from someone who's been where you're trying to go. it's so invaluable. And like you said,
Mm.
the native speakers don't, native speaking teachers don't really get what it's like to learn their language as a non-native. They might know what it's like to learn
Especially as
another one, but
as a slightly older person, right? Like, I mean,
yeah,
it's going to be very hard for a non-native or for a native speaker to like, they're not actually going to remember how often they messed up the tenses, or like, hearing my daughter make mistakes, like, and hearing how I correct them and things like that. Like, I'm pretty in tune to it because I am a former language teacher, and it's like fascinating to me to watch first language acquisition and second language acquisition all happening.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, that's just not how we don't think about the language that way. And we can be trained about it, and we can read all the research in the world that's done on second language acquisition, but it's really hard to like put yourself in those shoes.
yeah,
And so, yeah, I think it would be incredibly helpful, especially at the early, as someone who came out of that kind of program. I was so inspired by my first year teacher. And then I never had a non-native speaker ever again
yeah.
at any level, except I met a bunch of people through the community, and that was amazing. But like, it was, and there was not a single academic setting beyond first year Chinese where like someone was teaching me Chinese that wasn't a native speaker. And that was a little bit sad, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I was lucky when I moved to Taiwan. Before that, I was like self-studying, but when I moved to Taiwan, of course, all my teachers were native speakers because I was at the
Mhm.
university, and but I met Ash shortly after I moved there, and he was already at
Mhm.
a really high level in Chinese, and so I was able to pick his brain about stuff. And then
Yeah.
there was another. I don't know if you ever met Chris Fendler, but he was I think an adjunct in the translation interpretation department on the 10th floor. Was it 10th floor?
Mm-mm.
No, that 10th floor was the your program. But
Yeah.
anyway, in that same building,
Mm-mm-mm-mm.
and he's like
So maybe what we
very
need
close
is
to
like the
native.
mentor program or something like Outlier's Patreon.
Yeah. Well, it's not Patreon, but it's yeah, the membership program.
Or the membership program. Sorry.
Yeah. No, no, no.
Yeah, it looks like we have
We've got a
some
lot of
comments
questions.
coming in.
Yeah. So
Do
let
we have
me.
a, yeah? Should we work through these?
Yeah. Let's. Margrethe. Whenever I want to restart using Skritter and practice handwriting, I run into the fact that my active handwriting recall is way behind my actual Mandarin level. This is so frustrating. Any tips?
I would take the. I would. Yeah, I would go in and work through. Skritter has a character course as well. We're not as comprehensive as the master class. We do 150 characters just baked into our subscription, but it's really like theoretical knowledge that you need to be thinking about everything. I would brush up on that and work through that, and check out maybe the master class as well for like that next level. I feel like we're like a 3.5 out of 5 in terms of like what we want to cover. We're a little bit more casual because we're trying to attract a little bit wider audience, maybe
Yeah.
is a safe way to say it.
Yeah.
But I think that both of our courses complement really well. So building up that theoretical knowledge is really going to help you with that active recall in terms of like how you're thinking about characters. But no, it's just something that you have to spend time on. And I would say that like slow and steady gains, maybe focus on like a subset of characters. So like the HSK, like handwriting decks or something, you don't need to focus on I don't need to be able to write every single character that exists that I know that I can read. I think start smaller, start with larger, you're going to get a lot of volume out of learning high frequency characters because they appear in like every single word ever. Right. So start there, work on those, and then start building up your knowledge would be my answer. What do you think in terms of just like in general, active handwriting recall way behind Mandarin level?
Yeah, I mean it's you're always going to have something that lags a little bit behind the others, and I don't think
Probably the best thing to have lag, to be
I was
honest.
going to say, yeah, if you're going to pick one thing that's going to lag behind your other skills, probably active handwriting recall is the thing to pick. But yeah, I mean, if you're wanting to catch it up, uh, yeah, I mean, there's no reason to get frustrated that you don't know how to write everything that you know how to say, right? Or that you don't know how to write everything that you can hear and understand or read and understand.
Yep.
That's, you
Yep.
know, I can't, I can't recall every character that
I
I
can't
know.
either.
Like, yeah, yeah. I mean, um, and maybe Ash can, but he's,
I
as
mean,
they
I think
say,
I could.
outlier.
There was a time where I probably could do it close to 100%. Like my friends were
Mhm.
like, check this guy out. You know what I mean? But like
Yep,
I
yep,
did
yep.
it every single day. And I also wrote every single day. One thing I think that could be fun if we're trying to make this fun and interesting, I would say like pick things that are interesting to you, like interesting quotes, poetry. Like I've got these like little poem cards. I find it so fun to like go in and actually just like write poetry and work on handwriting that way. I'm working on something, I'm learning something new. I'm, working on these characters, but I'm doing it in kind of like an artistic, appreciative way. And then it's less about like, oh my gosh, I can't do, can't do this handwriting stuff.
Right.
Now, if you're in Skritter, you can also like turn off handwriting for a little while, or just like go in and do like quizzes or something. But like, I think it's totally okay to like use an SRS system and not be like, I have to handwrite every single day.
Right. So yeah, that's for okay. Sure. I mean, focusing on the stuff that's most frequently used and building up from there, I think is the approach to take, and just not worry about the fact that it's lagging behind. That's,
what else are people doing? Write characters on an iPad when doing daily Anki reviews for more than a year. Often discovery mode to have my level HSK TOC. Yeah, the TOCFL. All stuff. Oh. Yeah, Anki character, bro. I think it's interesting. Like Anki has come certainly a long way, and obviously technology, like it is. I see people using it all the time. I don't know. That just seemed to be a comment. I think there's a conversation going on.
Yeah. So the rest of his question was, even after changing the fonts in Anki to something less artificial, I feel I still have a lot of trouble recognizing characters in weird fonts. Any advice?
Yeah, I definitely need to like read more. Fonts are tricky. Like I install a lot of fonts. I like to switch them, but I think really it is like it's genuinely like raw exposure. You just need more. You need to. So like follow. Maybe if you're on the internet, like following some like handwriting. I follow like hashtag handwriting characters or like Socia Hanze or whatever, and like seeing someone who not only writes the characters but then also includes the text font, the type font underneath when they're captions is super helpful to like connecting those dots. For sure. That can be really helpful. But it's really it's mass exposure, to be honest. I think there's no other way around it. You just have to do it and know that not even native speakers struggle with the same kinds of things if they're not practiced enough at like reading handwriting or something. This is probably a byproduct of like being on a computer screen all day. You're like, this is the way it has to be written,
right?
And like that's like not true at all. If you change the font or someone writes with a in a calligraphy style. But slowly, as you start learning these tricks, certain components you can basically use the knowledge and build on it. So you're like, yes, the component gets written here. And then all of a sudden you see that they're using that same trick in other characters as well. And then you start like unlocking like the style or whatever. It's like you can like level up a lot quicker once you start breaking things apart and understanding them.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if you saw the thing Sinosplice John Pasden posted yesterday on Facebook. It's this bizarre handwriting font, and it just looks like nonsense at first, but it's just like
I thought it was like little like cutesy cartoon characters, and then it was literally the same thing. Just as John, about 10 seconds in, I was like, "Oh yeah, I can do that."
Yeah, I had the exact same thing where it was like, "Okay, these two I can figure out." Oh yeah, okay, I get it. It's like, yeah, and it's just
see that to me, that kind of stuff fascinates me because I love typology. I just love the artistic expression of written forms, and I find it so fast. So when I saw that, I was like, "This is so cool."
Yeah. I saw as soon as I saw it, I posted it to our Facebook group.
Nice. I thought about it, and then I got lazy.
Yeah. Well, but yeah, I mean, mass exposure to different types of fonts, and even like the little cutesy cartoon handwriting fonts and stuff like that, because those are so popular these days. Like, and you just have to dive in, I think, and you'll figure it out and get used to it eventually. So. Let's see. How long did it take you to be able to watch a Taiwanese drama or listen to a podcast without subtitles?
I'm not a TV watcher, so it's very hard for me to answer that question. Like of course I watch some TV. I'm not like anti-TV. I actually think like I probably need to like up my dramas or up my TV, but I did the other day, like go to a movie and it was in Mandarin, and I didn't really realize that I was like I was laughing before the people reading the subtitles, which felt really cool. I watched Everything Everywhere, and what's the title of the movie?
All at Once or something. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I'm like blanking, but like a lot of it's in Cantonese and Mandarin, and I was really enjoying it, and I kind of wasn't. It was like a weird moment where I didn't realize that I wasn't reading the English because I was just paying attention. Anyways, it wasn't 2022. For me, I feel like There was some point during grad school, which was about 5 years in for me, where I just didn't think about it anymore. I just kind of turned things on and just like it clicked. But
Hmm.
before that, I just don't even know. It was definitely during grad school because that was when I was like forced to like use it again every single day. My first time in Taiwan, I was definitely at the point where I was struggling. Like I could kind of understand things, I pick things out from context, but I wasn't quite to the point where I could like understand everything. And then, I mean, I still can't understand everything. Who am I kidding?
Yeah.
If anyone thinks I can, I'm not trying to imply that at all. But like, it wasn't normally there wasn't like a moment. It was normally a time where I would pick a series or a theme or a topic or whatever, and then I would just go all in on that for like a couple weeks. And it was like the first few moments, episodes, whatever it was, I was totally lost. And then slowly I would be like, oh, yes, this is how this person talks about everything. This is how this character talks.
Yep.
This is what this podcast is just about. This is how the host uses things. This is how the host sets up their questions. And you start on, like, you just realize that, like, yep, this is how this person does their thing.
Hmm.
And that actually is more, it was more like, if I put enough hours in on anything, I'm probably going to be able to figure it out. And I don't know what those hours are. It just depends on the topic and how much I know about the topic in English. But it was more about massive exposure and input in a specific field that would unlock me for everything for that thing,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, so the interpretation teacher I was telling you about, Chris Findler, he has this
Hmm.
analogy where it's like, what does he say? It's knowing Chinese, even at an advanced level, is like walking on a roof that's like this, and you're walking
Yep.
along the top, and as soon as the topic changes
Yeah.
to something that you haven't like spent a lot of time cramming the vocabulary, it's like you're
Yep.
just falling off the edge of the roof because
Yep.
you.
You're like, what is, and then you feel like an idiot.
Yep. There's just so much like vocabulary to learn in any given field.
Yep.
And so what he says
Yep.
is like the way to improve your Chinese is constantly change the context that you're
Yep.
in, whether
Yeah.
it's, whatever show you're watching. And I talk about in our pronunciation and accent masterclass that there's a unit on like chorusing and shadowing, and then one of the lessons is how to use those two techniques to basically make a TV show or a movie your textbook, and like
Hmm.
how to go through and process that. And one of the things
Hmm.
I say is like, so okay, you've done an episode of a TV show. Now, what do you do? Do you go on to episode 2 or do you switch to a different TV show? Well, if you go to episode 2, you're going to find episode 2 is not as much of a slog as episode 1 was.
Hmm.
Because like you said, you've
Hmm.
already gotten used to the way that people talk, the types of
Yep.
situations that they find themselves
Yep.
in. And so
Yep.
you'll find as you go through the series, it gets easier and easier, and you might get to a point where you can just watch a new episode and you get most of it, right? But
Yep.
then as soon as you switch to a new TV series, it's
Yeah,
going to
you're
be a
kind of
slog again, right?
you're probably not at zero anymore, but you're
Exactly, yeah.
like you've just switched characters. Now you to level up that character in that specific way or whatever it is. Yeah, no, I completely agree.
Yeah.
I would actually argue that if you really want to be meticulous about it, before you even go to episode 2, you rewatch episode 1
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
if you can do it.
Yeah.
Because then you're gonna, now you already know what's happened. There's no new surprises in the show. I mean, maybe there is in the language side, but like you can start anticipating what's about to happen, which means you have more time to process the language and the knowledge and pick up the nuances of what's actually happening. Or maybe you unlock a new word because you're like, yeah, I understood all that stuff, but I didn't cut. Anyways, yeah, I mean, you can cut and slice these things a million different ways, and it just depends on like genuinely like how deep do you want to go.
Right.
Also, to anyone that's kind of stressing about this, like try and do any of these things in your native language as well and be as critical as you are in your second language. And you are going to find
Right.
that you are not anywhere near as amazingly awesome in your native language as you probably think you are. Like,
Yeah.
go listen to a lecture on theoretical physics if you're not a physicist and try and understand what happened. Pick up a
Yep.
journal for the New England Journal of Medicine and then tell me what it's about. Like, you're going to feel lost, and that's okay. But it's really good, I think, sometimes to like remind ourselves that we actually do this all the time, and we make mistakes all the time in our native language. And we're so critical of our non-native language,
Yep.
and like we just need to like give ourselves a little hug and be like, it's okay, we're gonna get through this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like if you think about like, okay, if you can watch an episode of Friends in English, right? But then you switch over to like Battlestar Galactica, you're going to be lost, And even
Mm,
as a native speaker, if you're not into sci-fi,
yeah.
like, a lot of that stuff's going to go over your head until you get into it.
Mhm.
So, And yeah, or like
But definitely watch
Metro.
Battlestar Galactica and The Expanse because they're like amazing.
Oh, you sound like Ash. Those are two of his favorite shows, actually, I think.
Oh, okay. But they're really good.
Yeah.
I do like. I don't know how much sci-fi stuff you can see behind me, but it's definitely up there.
Oh,
All right, we've got
I
some
see
more
the
stuff
Star
in
Wars thing
here.
up there. Let's
Oh
see. I
yeah.
think it's related to general skills and reading in general. A good reader
How
can
long did it
quickly.
take you to be able to? No, we did that. I think it was yeah.
Yeah.
Any resource recommendation to intermediate learners studying Chinese at home? I want to advance all areas reading, writing, if it's too broad, y'all can ignore. I mean, I think at that intermediate level, it is a lot about exposure, but you still probably want to be in the comprehensible input realm. So, like trying to find podcasts that have transcripts, like just my gut impressions here for this kind of stuff. I really love apps like Do Chinese or Chairman's Bow. Um, Do Chinese does have an integration with Skritter, so if you are using that, like you can like sign in and save and do that, which I think is really cool. But
Yep.
these like graded reader kind of contents, honestly, like textbooks are not a bad resource at the intermediate level, especially some of the more interesting ones. I would try and look at some of the like index of what things are in there. Don't just grab a textbook because this is intermediate. Find something that might be interesting to you. There's also some really cool books out there for like, learning Chinese through movies or whatever. Or like at that point, maybe go on the YouTube grind and start watching or using language learning through Netflix and language learning through YouTube. I can't remember what they've rebranded as, but there's a really good plugin if you search on like Chrome or Firefox where they'll start like allowing you to pause subtitled episodes, and this can just be a great way of,
Mm.
you know, working on this stuff. And then the thing is though, is that once you start doing the reading and speaking, like I do think that you probably want to work with someone, maybe it's an italki tutor or a language exchange partner or even a study buddy. But like you
Yep.
need to start forcing yourself to write about the things that you're listening to or
Mm.
watching and speak about it
Oh,
and
right.
really engage. This is just not going to come naturally.
Yep.
It will never. Your reading and your writing will never improve if you don't like. You have to work at all of those things, and
Yep.
really hone in on those individual skills.
Yeah, one of the best courses I took at the MTC actually was, and I think it was new the year that I took it. I forget the
Meaning
title of it, but
Guangbo.
it was basic. Well, Mini Guanboju was really good, but the one I took after that was newspaper, but it wasn't the
Oh yeah.
newspaper book one or whatever. It was recent topics. So every day, three people would bring in.
Was it this one? Oh, it's a different. Okay.
No. This was
Is that
actually like
here?
you would bring in a newspaper article from the previous day.
Oh,
So it
that's
was all
fun.
current events, and so we would all take
Yeah.
the first few minutes to read the article, and then we would discuss it in class. And
Mm-hmm.
it was so good, man, because it was just, it was recent stuff. It made for good discussion. And we did probably three times as many newspaper articles that semester as we would have if we were doing the newspaper textbook that everyone does. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like doing stuff like that and reading stuff and then talking about it is such a good exercise.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Definitely trying to find and leverage like the community of people. There's going to be people out there. You don't need a lot of them, but like for me in grad school, like Ula was my study buddy. So we would meet regularly and talk and set up like, hey, we're going to do this. We had like group assignments and everything else. But that kind of stuff and finding those kind of allies can be really helpful because you really do need to like force yourself to use the language and make it fun, right? It sounds like that was a really cool course because you're picking things that you're interested in, at least for
yeah,
that bit.
yeah. And
Um,
Ruthie, just one little plug. If you go through our previous live streams on our YouTube channel, I did one last year about resources for intermediate and advanced learners. So that may be a good one to take a
there you
look at.
go.
So,
Boom.
let's see
Yeah, and
where.
Hacking Chinese has a huge. You can go on Hacking Chinese, which is Ula's blog. So
Hmm.
he does or his website hackingchinese.com. He's got a whole like resource section, probably one of the most comprehensive out there,
Yeah,
and you can actually filter by level and also by skills. So I would check that out as well.
I was
In
gonna
there,
say, man,
so we've
that
got
must have been quite a study buddy.
oh
To have
oh
Ula
we
as a
would we would
study
up the
buddy.
game. So if we didn't do our work, then we would pay for each other's dinner, which was super fun.
Oh,
And
nice.
we would like chat in Chinese the whole time. We were like super uber dorky at the time. It was great. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to do it.
He's my shady though, so I always gotta, let him know like, yeah.
Yeah, put him in his place a little bit.
Respect, man. Come on.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
All right, let's.
Outliers. So I just finished the character course, learned 300 characters. How would you recommend using Skritter to continue the process of learning characters systematically? So I think I think one of the worst things that you can do with any of these kind of flashcardy apps, it doesn't matter if it's Skritter, Anki, whatever, is like start thinking that you can just go crazy on lists that you aren't actually learning from. So like try and keep things contextual. No matter what you're doing, it's going to seem like you're not making as much progress, but you're making more progress than most people that are just trying to cram through and do things, unless you are like a machine and you have a lot of time. Like for me, I was at a very high level and I was like, I'm going to learn like 3,500 characters tomorrow because I need them tomorrow. And that was insane. And like, I still regret it to this day because it was my brain really hurt for a very long time. But I would say that continue to add context, and just be one of the things that you can do no matter what is to just maintain that mindfulness. So go in, get the Outlier dictionary on Pleco, check out the entries inside of Skritter, and just when you find a new character that you don't understand, if you want to understand it, then break it apart, deconstruct it, understand the components and the forms and the structure, and then add that to your repertoire. Don't be afraid. You're going to forget it sometimes. It's okay. But like, be mindful. And if you continuously be mindful and be exploratory and curious, you're just going to make very fast progress. Anything to add there?
No, I don't
Oh,
think
you can.
so.
How about you take the next one?
Yeah. Well, I was prepping for that actually. So
Awesome.
I'm here looking up old Chinese so I can try to have a decent answer. So, Hugh, what, mate? I'll come back to that in just a moment after I get all my stuff together. So, Jake, if you could if you could go on to the next one while I'm looking the stuff up.
Oh, okay. I think it was a comment generally about teaching practicing handwriting feel a waste
Oh,
of
I
time, but
see.
of
Yep.
course it is important. Yeah. Logos are
Logos.
difficult sometimes. Seal script is totally tough. I mean, it's just like these are aesthetic things. This is like when someone is making a decision and they don't care if it's difficult to understand when they pick seal script. They think it's cool, right? Like, I don't know. Is there
Yeah.
like a good way to? I think you just need to like expose yourself to a load of seal script to be able to read
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to learn seal script, well, I could talk for hours about that. I don't know if you knew this, but in my 1 year in grad school in Taiwan, like I didn't finish my master's. I just did 1 year, but I took three different classes that required us to copy the 说文解字 by hand. Like, not the entire thing. Only one of them actually required me to do the whole thing, but the other ones was like, okay, you don't have to do all 9,990 or 9,933 characters. You can just pick
How
any
long did it take
2,000
you to do
characters
it?
you want.
How long did it take?
It took a semester of basically 30 minutes to an hour a day.
Mm.
Um,
Did you find it beneficial?
well, I sure learned how to read seal script.
All
I
right, there
don't
you go.
I don't think it was the most
But
efficient
you
way
would
of
not
doing it.
condone that on anybody if they. Yeah, okay. But no,
Yeah,
skill. I mean, scripts, fonts, whatever. It's always a little bit difficult.
yeah, for sure. But I mean, if you could learn the 540 radicals from the 说文解字in
Hmm.
seal script, and you'd be able to pick apart most characters and figure out what they are. So,
Okay,
yeah.
good to know.
Um,
Yeah, it's there are some things where it just is a little bit brute force can kind of really do. It's like Tianyash or stuff the duck a little bit, and
yeah.
it can be helpful. It depends. You got to pick your battles, but sometimes you just got to go all in. I don't know. I kind of like hats off to you, John. I haven't gone that far or that hardcore on things just yet, but maybe someday.
It's not for everyone.
Great to hear. I've used Skritter for Japanese for years now. What is your advice to move from individual character reading into staging up to more complex texts? Um, yeah, graded reader content. So
Yeah.
on the Japanese side, maybe something like Link or Satori Reader, I think is really good. I'm not sure how much like graded reader content out there. Those are the two that kind of highly get recommended. I know, the Link team has a deep, understanding of Japanese, and so there's a lot of content out there for that. You're probably gonna have to pay for some of it. Satori may have some free stuff, but I think at that level, if you're like looking into getting more complex text, start with stuff that you can kind of understand. You can also start looking maybe inside of Skritter specifically at some of our JLPT sentences. Those are written. We have a Tomoko Sensei. She's a Japanese teacher from Tokyo or from Japan. She's not from Tokyo. Maybe she is. I'm not sure. But she is writing our sentences, trying to be level appropriate. So like start with sentences, start building up your confidence there, starting at those lower levels, and then slowly kind of working your way into higher stuff. But I think comprehensible input basically. So finding stuff that's written for X number of levels, maybe X number of kanji, is how I would do it. And I would do that. I would do the same thing for Chinese as well.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, there's Robert. If you have an app called Kanji Study, if you're an Android user, he has some graded readers in his app too.
There you
They
go.
also have, of course, our dictionary add-on. So,
There you go.
oh, any advice for
Hoping to
moving from C to
study.
J? So that's chugokugo. That's
Uh,
the Japanese word for
yeah.
Chinese, right?
Uh,
Any advice for
character
moving
name.
from Chinese to Japanese or Japanese to Chinese?
Yeah, use Skritter. It makes it a lot easier. No, I don't actually know. I haven't made the full switch. I think you're a better person to respond to this one. I'm getting just into it, but I'm like hiragana, katakana, and some kanji level.
Mm.
But my kanji is like way too like I'm like this is easy. It's not. I know it's not going to be easy forever, and this is very much of me being a beginner and an idiot because it's already. I know it's going to get difficult, but so far I'm like overly confident right now. So bring me down a peg, John.
Yeah, I mean, well, like I said earlier, it is a huge help knowing this stuff. If you're going from Japanese to Chinese, it'll be easier. Excuse me, and when I say easier, I mean like marginally easier in the grand scheme of
Mm,
things to learn traditional characters first and then learn the simplifications later. Because
mm.
Japanese kanji are, even the ones that have been simplified, some of them are simplified in the same way that they do in China, but most of them, I call it simplification light. I mean, they
Yeah, I've
change a
noticed
couple
that
of
already.
strokes
I've
here, and then
noticed that already. Yeah.
yeah. So it's not nearly as simplified. So it's much closer to the traditional characters.
Mm,
Um, and I would say pay attention to patterns of sound change. So like for me going from Chinese to Japanese, I noticed early on that like if a syllable ended in like an ng in Mandarin, it was almost always or possibly always going to have a long vowel in Japanese in the onyomi reading.
mm.
So like paying attention to little patterns like that, or you know that say
Is that something that just comes like naturally with exposure, or or like teacher? Does this get pointed out in like textbooks, or I don't? I guess I don't know enough about your. I'll have to pick your brain sometime about Jap. I'm just trying to be
yeah.
like mindful of
I
time.
mean, I would
With
think
the with
that
the
in a
with the
textbook
different
for a
readings,
what's that?
with the different like readings and stuff, like I mean I'm sure it's one of these things where like at some point like someone's like, yeah, this is like the pattern for it, and then everyone's like, crud, I wish you would have told me that sooner.
Yeah, I mean
Are you working
there's
on a character, a kanji course? Do you have a course yet? You're working on it,
we
right?
have the kanji masterclass. Yep. Um,
Nice.
but yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, it's probably not pointed out in most resources, but if you're using like a textbook for Chinese speakers to learn Japanese, then maybe they would point it out, more often. But
Got it. Or
uh,
like, or maybe the other way as well, too, right?
yeah,
Going
for sure,
from
going the other
if you're
direction.
confident with Japanese and then going the other direction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the trick being like going from Japanese to Chinese is uh well, no, it's probably about the same. It's just from my perspective, it seems like the patterns work pretty well going one way, but they might not work as well going the other
Mm.
way. But I would think it's
I just
just different
remember my
patterns that
classmates
work
that
well.
were from Japan always had no problem with the Tingxie, but
Oh
then they
yeah,
really
yeah,
had problems conversing. So it was like, I don't know,
yeah, yeah, for sure.
and I
And
was always like, this is unfair, but I'm like, we're all in the, like, they're in my, it's not like they're not in my level. So like, we just have different strengths and weaknesses.
right,
So,
yeah. I mean, and the thing is, like a lot of vocabulary in Japanese is because a lot of people will say, okay, if you just cram 2,000 characters or kanji up front, like using Heisig or remembering the kanji or
mhm,
whatever, then you'll
mhm,
basically be on the same level as a Chinese native speaker starting to learn Japanese. That is
mhm.
absolutely not the case. I mean, it's
Got it.
learning
Yeah.
to write 2,000 characters given an English prompt, like it helps, sure, but what really helps is knowing the vocabulary because there's so many loan words in Japanese that come from Chinese, and there's
Yeah,
vice versa too.
I've already been noticing some of that as
Yeah.
well, just like
Well,
picking up. And I'm kind of like I mean, I think in general, like human, we're all pattern seeking, right? So we want to like think, oh, I've found the magical bullet, and I don't think I have, but I have been noticing, like, okay, that's definitely a loan word. That's kind of helpful, even
Yeah.
like what came up the other day, I was like Dienwa, and I was like telephone. Okay, that sounds like Dienwa. This is great, and it's written like yes, like that one just feels like low. It feels like there's going to be some moments when making these switches where maybe it's not easy, but the cost at least is lower slightly. Like you get a little
For
discount
sure.
on some things, and that's really helpful.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
and you'll get to where you can pick up things in context. Like I forget what the word was, but the other day, like my girlfriend was speaking Japanese to somebody, and I heard her say, like, I can follow a conversation basically, but like get the gist. But then she said some word, and I was like, oh, I bet it's such and such word. I was like, oh, does that word mean this?
mm,
And she's like, yeah. How did you know?
mm,
I'm like, well, I haven't learned in Japanese, but just knowing the sound patterns of
yeah.
how
Robert was
sounds
saying
change.
in the reading courses in studying Japan, the Chinese students learn the on kunyomi way faster than the Western students in class.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
That's
because
the final comment.
especially
Yeah.
the own
Yeah.
ratings
There
is
seems like there was some conversation about seal script and things, and because of blackout and understandings and that stuff. There was a shout out from Mark here for Mandarin Blueprint method. We actually, fun fact about Mandarin Blueprint for anyone watching, we just added all of their decks. I just published them like literally 2 days ago.
oh cool.
I was just on Luke and Phil's podcast. It hasn't published yet, but we had it was a very interesting, intense, fun conversation. Very different from this one. So if you are interested or you liked what you heard today, I don't know, if you want to hear more Jake Gill and talk, like we talked about some cool stuff. It was really fun. They had some really interesting questions. But I did also go in and add all the Mandarin Blueprint decks. I didn't get a chance, like for me at this level, it's really hard for me to I do want to go in and judge. I know that they've done a ton of work, and I know that those guys are working on, to me, it feels like it's like Heisig, but in the modern day and age with a lot of memory hooks and everything else. And I'm just I'm not going to jump into their advanced. I was a little lost trying to jump into their advanced stuff because I didn't take all their beginner stuff. But they are definitely optimizing and trying to give you like a really like the fastest course possible to unlock like all the characters. So if you're interested in something like that and you want to go quick, definitely do that. And yeah, we just added those decks on Skritter. So
Oh cool. Yeah, very
shout
cool.
out to them. And they're also seem to be working hard on like community and everything else. And again, it's another
Mm.
product created by non-native speakers that are trying to solve problems. So
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah, they're sharp guys. I Skyped with them a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they know their stuff and they're
Yep.
very passionate. And I know Phil did he did a undergrad in China and I think both of them have passed high levels of HSK and
Mm.
so they're putting their money where their mouth is in terms of like what they've actually done and trying to apply it and they seem really nice. I love chatting with them as well.
Yeah.
It's funny, like almost everybody in this space is actually pretty cool when it comes down to it. We're a pretty small community of people that are working pretty hard every single day trying to make this a little bit easier
Easier
for
for other
others and
people.
ourselves
Yeah, yeah.
to be fair. So
It's just like what you
uh,
said earlier. It's like we're making what we wish we had had, and I think you
yeah,
guys are doing the
yeah,
same thing, and Mandarin
yeah,
Blueprint definitely is. So,
yeah, for sure.
um,
So yeah, maybe we just need to like come up with we need like a super pact or something. I mean, we're slowly working on it. Like I love opening our apps and seeing your stuff in there. And I do hope that we can actually have some like in-app purchase for like the full form because you have done so much time and energy and resources. And so if anyone is watching this from the Skritter side and you don't know that you can go in the info section and see the Outlier stuff, like check it out. But also know that what we have in there is only like a little bit of what John and Ash bring to the table in their full form entries, and so you should definitely check it out. And like right now, you can get that in Pleco. You can go buy it on John's website and John and Ash's website, and then and we really hope that someday we can also have that, and maybe also the Chinese, the Japanese side as well for the Japanese stuff.
yeah, for
Like
sure.
R&D, man, I'm definitely working on leveling up our Japanese side. So
Yeah, cool. We can talk about that. So
all right, well, my hang
your
around
time
for
is up.
15 minutes,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, is
So
over.
I know there are a couple other
But I think
comments and
we
questions. Sorry we couldn't get to all of them, guys. But
wait. There's
yeah.
only what else is in here? Thank you,
Oh, those.
Mos. Using Chinese, speaking Japanese, vice versa.
Oh, why learn from English?
Oh yeah. Oh,
Oh,
I
brain
mean that's the
processing
dream,
power.
right?
For
That's
me, it's
the
brain
dream.
processing. It's,
Yeah, it can be a
I'm,
little tough.
yeah, I need to
I
conserve
think
my.
if you can do it though, and you're comfortable doing it, like that is a great way. Your language skills, like both sides are going to get really good, and
Yeah,
it's going to be a different kind of challenge. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, I think it's really like it sounds. That's to me, that's kind of the dream.
yeah, it's
I'm
great.
sure you have some books back here
Of course I
that
do.
do
I
exactly.
always do book drops.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah. So this is a book they sell in Taiwan. I think they sell it in China too, but it's for people learning Japanese from Chinese. Well,
Yeah.
the light is washing it out, but yeah. I mean, I have some stuff for it, but it is just it's mental processing power that I need to conserve for work. So it's just in a lot of ways it's easier to
It can be
learn.
a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But like it is fun. I think if anyone is trying to do that stuff, like a good way to figure out if you're kind of at that level and ready without going in and buying, you can spend so much money on books as you see behind him, and as I don't have nearly as many back here. Also, my it's like if we were closer, it might be a little bit more. Anywho, you can like go on YouTube, type it in, and just see what happens. Right? You can. There are so many free resources out there that you can read and check
yeah.
out, and just see like, hey, can I understand this stuff? If you can, then maybe you are ready for a book that's using that, or you find a channel that you like that does it, and you go down that and have some fun.
Yep.
And every now and again, it's just good to like have a little check in, like, hey, how good is my Chinese for understanding Japanese, or vice versa, or if you're just two things I think are really awesome as like kind of a closing, just for as someone super far into the journey but not anywhere near the end. It is always good to challenge yourself when you can, and also really good to like stop and reflect at how far you've come.
Yep.
Like I don't think we do it often enough. But to like, you ever want to feel good about yourself, go open up the first textbook you ever got and read that first chapter and free
Yep.
and figure out how, or try and teach someone how to say anything in Chinese that does if they don't speak Chinese, and they're gonna struggle so hard, and you're gonna
Yep.
be like, how do you not hear it? So like remember how far we've come as we're on this journey, and don't give up. Find time every single day to do it. Right. So
Yep. Yeah.
yeah.
There's so much you can never do it all. You can't hold yourself to a perfect standard. Uh,
Nope.
yeah.
Sacrifice perfectionism for progress.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
literally written on my board right there. But
Is
yeah,
it?
hell yeah, man.
Yeah. It's good. I mean, we're never going to be
little
perfect, right?
little daily
Nobody.
reminders that I need sometimes, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Actually, one of my final exam for one of my courses in grad school, the teacher said, "By the way, nobody's getting 100 on this. The highest score you can get is 99 because nobody is perfect in Chinese."
Nice.
Like,
Love
all
it.
right,
Love it.
sure.
Love it.
Yeah. All right,
You're
Jake,
like,
man, thanks for
okay,
doing this. This is a
teacher.
lot of fun.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for having me, and thanks to
Yep.
everyone for watching and sticking around. I love the comments. I love the questions. Hopefully, we covered a bunch of stuff, and yeah, I really appreciate it, and I'm super looking forward to just thank you to you and Ash for the stuff that you're doing, because I was really excited to come on here and just like hearing about what I missed last month. Like, if I sign up, can I get in on what you guys talked about last month? I want to hear about Middle and Old Chinese tone changes.
Yeah, yeah,
How does it
you get
work?
access to all the back catalog.
Oh,
So
okay,
yeah,
sweet.
it's
All
all
right, all
there, and
right,
we've
all
got a discussion community, like a forum, and we'll
right,
be doing
all right, all
live
right.
streams
And
like
how
this.
much? How much is it?
It is $20 a month, or
Oh, what a deal!
200 for a year if you want to do the annual option. But yeah,
Cool,
I think it's going to be valuable for people. So it's early
cool,
days. This is just month two, but yeah, we've got some good stuff in there. We've got a lot of good stuff planned. So
cool. Awesome. Well,
all
非常
right.
感谢, and thank you everyone for watching. Have a good, and this will be live on YouTube, so we can share it
Yeah, yeah,
when we're done.
this will be up. It'll be available publicly. The future installments won't be, but this one's going to be public on YouTube. So yeah, share it with your people, and I'll do the same. And
Cool.
Outlier people, if you're not using Skritter and you need to work on your stroke order, your hand, it's really
Check it out.
a
Use the Outlier discount code if you do, so they get some credit.
yeah, that's right. We have discount codes. I can post those in the video description later. So
Cool, cool, cool. All right.
all right, man. Yeah, thanks
再见,
for doing this.
everybody.
Yep. Take care, guys. Thanks for watching.
Peace.